in the heart of the crystalline city of Velara, where spires of iridescent quartz pierced the violet-hued sky and rivers of liquid light flowed through gardens of singing flora. The grand celestial palace shimmered like a dream carved from starlight. It was here, beneath vaulted ceilings woven with living constellations and guarded by silent sentinels of polished obsidian, that Prince Joran of Earth found himself on the precipice of a union that could either unite two galaxies or ignite a war. Joran, broad-shouldered and sun-browned from his years aboard deep-range exploration vessels, stood in ceremonial robes of silver-threaded velvet, his heart pounding like a war drum beneath his ribs. Before him, bathed in the soft glow of twin moons filtering through stained glass domes, knelt Princess Lyra of House Salyun, a vision of alien grace with skin like polished alabaster and cascading hair the color of molten rubies, her eyes twin pools of liquid gold that held both fire and tenderness. They had met 2 solar cycles ago during the First Accord Summit, when Joran's diplomatic vessel had crash-landed on the outer rim of the Salyun expanse. Lyra, then only a junior envoy, had defied protocol to rescue him from the wreckage, shielding him from xenophobic zealots who saw humans as little more than primitive interlopers. In the weeks that followed, as Joran recovered in her private greenhouse sanctuary filled with bioluminescent orchids and whispering vines, something unspoken bloomed between them. Laughter over Earth's absurd gravity myths, shared silence under alien constellations, and a kiss beneath a meteor shower that tasted of stardust and promise. Now, after years of petitions, political maneuvering, and whispered threats from both their courts, they stood ready to exchange vows that would bind human and Salyun in matrimony, a first in galactic history. But just as the High Oracle of the Twin Moons raised her staff to begin the binding chant, a voice like shattering glass cut through the hushed reverence of the chamber. "Human," it declared, sharp and regal, "you cannot simply marry my sister." From the eastern archway, flanked by armored attendants in crimson cloaks, strode another figure. Taller, leaner, her posture rigid with authority. Princess Saren, Lyra's elder sister and heir to the Salyun throne, stepped forward with deliberate grace, her own white skin flawless under the palace lights, her red hair braided with threads of electrum that hummed faintly with ancestral energy. Unlike Lyra's gentle luminescence, Saren radiated an aura of controlled intensity. Her golden eyes narrowed not in anger, but in something far more dangerous: principle. The court gasped. Protocol dictated that only immediate family and bonded witnesses be present during the celestial binding. Saren's interruption was not merely rude, it was sacrilege. Yet she did not flinch. She stopped mere paces from Joran, her gaze locking onto his with unnerving focus. "You seek to take my sister's hand," she said, her voice lower now, almost intimate, yet carrying to every corner of the hall. "But you offer nothing in return but your species' fragile promises. The Salyun do not wed for sentiment. We bind for balance, for symmetry. My sister demands equal vows, but I demand equal sacrifice." Lyra rose quickly, her hands trembling. "Saren, this is not the time." "It is precisely the time," Saren interrupted, not unkindly, but with the weight of centuries of tradition behind her words. "The accord allows interspecies unions, yes, but only if both parties undergo the trial of twin hearts. You know this, sister. You chose not to tell him." She turned back to Joran, her expression unreadable. To marry a Salyun princess, a suitor must prove not only love, but worthiness. Not through poetry or pretty words, but through the trial, a test of courage, loyalty, and selflessness. And because you are human, because your kind has no innate resonance with our bioenergetic fields, you must face it alone. Without Lyra's aid. Without our technology. Only your will, your body, and your heart. Joran swallowed hard. He had heard whispers of the trial during his time on Velara. Legends of suitors vanishing into the mirror labyrinth beneath the palace, never to return, their minds unraveled by illusions of their deepest fears. But he had assumed those tales were exaggerations, relics of a more brutal age. Now, standing before the woman he loved and her formidable sister, he realized the truth. Love in the Salyun court was not given freely. It was earned in blood and shadow. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his gut. Saren studied him for a long moment, then gave a single, slow nod. "Then the trial begins at moonrise." That night, as the twin moons of Velara aligned in the sky, a rare celestial event known as the Twin Embrace, the palace descended into solemn anticipation. Joran was led through corridors lined with ancient murals depicting past trials, each ending in either triumph or tragedy. He wore no armor, carried no weapon, Only a simple tunic of white silk and a pendant Lyra had pressed into his palm before they parted. A tiny vial of her tears, said to glow when true despair threatened to consume him. "Remember," she had whispered, her golden eyes glistening. "The labyrinth does not test your strength, it tests your truth." The entrance to the mirror labyrinth lay beneath the Hall of Echoes, a circular chamber where every footstep resonated as if the floor itself were listening. As the High Oracle chanted the opening rite, the ground split open with a groan of shifting stone, revealing a spiraling staircase descending into darkness. Joran took a deep breath and stepped inside. The labyrinth was not made of stone or metal, but of living mirrors, surfaces that shifted and rippled like liquid mercury, reflecting not just his image, but fragments of his memories, his regrets, his secret shames. In one corridor, he saw himself as a boy, failing to save his younger sister from a river's current. In another, he watched his first starship explode, crew lost because of his miscalculation. The mirrors whispered in voices that sounded like his own. "You are not enough. You will fail her too." But then he remembered Lyra's laughter, the way she defended him before the Salyun Council when they called him soft-fleshed and untested. He remembered how she'd taught him the Salyun lullaby that calmed storm beasts, how she'd cried when he showed her Earth's oceans through a hollow projector. Love, he realized, wasn't the absence of fear, it was the choice to move forward despite it. He pressed on, deeper into the maze. The illusions grew more potent. At one turn, he faced a mirror image of himself, older, weary, standing over Lyra's lifeless body. "This is your future," the reflection sneered. "You bring death wherever you go." Joran clenched his fists, but instead of striking the mirror, he spoke aloud. "I may fail, but I will never stop trying to protect her." The mirror shattered. Further in, the labyrinth conjured Saren, not as an adversary, but as a vision of cold judgment. "You think love is enough?" she asked, her voice echoing from all directions. "Love without sacrifice is vanity. Without courage, it is noise." Joran didn't argue. He simply said, "Then let me prove it." The final chamber was unlike the others. No mirrors, only a single pedestal holding two objects: a dagger forged from black star iron, and a scroll inscribed with Salyun script. The oracle's voice echoed in his mind. "To complete the trial, you must choose. Take the dagger and sever your left hand, a symbol of earthly attachment, or take the scroll and renounce your claim to Lyra forever." Joran stared at the choices, his breath ragged. He thought of Earth, of his family, of everything he'd left behind to be here. Then he thought of Lyra's smile, the way her red hair caught the light, the quiet strength in her voice when she said, "You are my home now." He reached for the dagger, but as his fingers closed around the hilt, the chamber trembled. Alarms blared through the palace above. The ground shook violently, and the walls of the labyrinth cracked open, revealing not stone, but sky, smoke-filled, burning. Through the fissure, Joran saw it. A fleet of obsidian warships descending upon Velara, their hulls marked with the sigil of the Cthar Dominion, a xenophobic empire that had long opposed the Accord. They had come to stop the Union by force. Before he could react, a blast of energy tore through the palace gardens above. The labyrinth collapsed around him, mirrors exploding into shards of light. Joran shielded his face, then scrambled upward through the rubble, emerging into chaos. Flames licked at the crystalline towers. Salyun guards fought desperately against Cthar shock troops armed with plasma lances. In the central courtyard, Lyra stood defiant, her hands raised, channeling bioluminal energy to shield fleeing civilians. But she was outnumbered, and Saren was nowhere to be seen. Joran sprinted toward her, dodging falling debris and energy blasts. When he reached her side, she gasped in relief, then grabbed his arm. "The Cthar, they've taken Saren. They believe she holds the key of Velara, the artifact that controls the planet's defensive grid." "Where?" Joran shouted over the din. "The Sky Spire." Lyra pointed to the tallest tower, now swarming with enemy soldiers. "But it's suicide to go there alone." "I'm not alone," Joran said, meeting her eyes. "Not anymore." Together, they fought their way through the palace grounds. Joran used his knowledge of human combat tactics, flanking, distraction, improvised explosives made from shattered light crystals, while Lyra wielded her innate Salyun abilities, weaving barriers of solidified sound and unleashing pulses of concussive harmony. They moved as one, their trust forged in fire. At one point, a Cthar sniper took aim at Lyra from a balcony. Joran tackled her to the ground just as the shot rang out. the bolt searing past where her head had been. She looked up at him, breathless, and whispered, "You saved me." "You do the same," he replied, helping her up. They reached the base of the sky spire, where a massive energy barrier blocked entry. "Only royal blood can deactivate it," Lyra said grimly. "And Saren's been taken." Joran looked at the barrier, then at the pendant still clutched in his hand, the vial of Lyra's tears. An idea sparked. What if it's not about blood, but bond? Before she could question him, he smashed the vial against the barrier. The liquid inside flared with golden light, and for a heartbeat, the barrier flickered, recognizing the emotional resonance between Lyra and the tears she'd shed for him. It wasn't enough to drop it completely, but it created a narrow gap. "Now," Joran urged. They slipped through just as the barrier resealed. Inside the spire, they ascended spiraling staircases lit by emergency beacons. At the summit, in the observation chamber, they found Saren bound in energy cuffs, kneeling before a hulking Cthar warlord named Vrax. The key of Valara, a pulsating orb of blue plasma, floated above a pedestal between them. "Ah," Vrax rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "The human pet and the lesser princess. Come to witness the end of your pathetic alliance." Saren lifted her head, her golden eyes blazing. "Joran, don't let him activate the key. If he syncs it to Cthar frequency, he can turn Valara's own defenses against us." Vrax laughed. "Too late." He raised a clawed hand toward the orb, but Joran was already moving. He hurled a shard of crystal he'd kept from the labyrinth. It struck Vrax's wrist, disrupting his focus. The orb wobbled. Lyra seized the moment, unleashing a harmonic scream that shattered the energy cuffs binding Saren. Freed, Saren lunged for the key, but Vrax intercepted her with a backhand that sent her crashing into the wall. Joran charged, dodging plasma fire, and tackled Vrax off the pedestal. They grappled on the glass floor, the city burning below them. Vrax was stronger, his exoskeleton nearly impervious. But Joran had one advantage: unpredictability. He feigned a punch, then drove his knee into a joint in Vrax's armor, a weak point he'd noticed during their scuffle. The warlord roared in pain. Meanwhile, Lyra and Saren worked together, their voices merging in an ancient Salyun duet that destabilized the orb's frequency. The key began to pulse erratically. "You fools!" Vrax bellowed, throwing Joran aside. "Without control, the key will overload and take this entire spire with it." He activated a self-destruct sequence on his wrist console. 10 seconds. Joran scrambled to his feet. "We have to get out." But Saren stood firm, her hands outstretched toward the orb. "No, I can stabilize it, but I need a conduit. A living anchor." Lyra understood instantly. "Saren, no. It has to be me," Saren said, her voice calm now. "I am heir. This is my duty." She looked at Joran. "You wanted to prove your worth. Now prove you understand what this union truly means. Not just love, but shared burden." Before anyone could stop her, she plunged her hands into the orb. Light erupted, blinding and pure. The overload reversed. The spire stopped shaking. But Saren collapsed, her skin glowing faintly, her breath shallow. The Cthar fleet, sensing their leader's defeat, retreated into the void. In the aftermath, as medics tended to the wounded and the fires were quenched by rain summoned through Salyun weatherweaving, Joran knelt beside Saren's bedside in the royal infirmary. Lyra stood at the window, watching the twin moons rise once more. Saren opened her eyes. "Did I miss the wedding?" Joran managed a tired smile. "The trial's not over yet, is it?" She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "No, but perhaps. The hardest part is behind you." Later that evening, under the restored constellations of the palace dome, the High Oracle resumed the binding chant. This time, Saren stood not as an obstacle, but as witness, her presence a silent acknowledgement of Joran's worth. As Joran and Lyra exchanged vows, equal, balanced, forged in sacrifice, the palace itself seemed to sigh in approval, its crystalline walls humming a harmony older than stars. And though the Cthar threat still loomed beyond the system's edge, and the galaxy remained vast and uncertain, in that moment, beneath the twin moons of Valara, two souls from different worlds stood together, not as human and alien, but as partners, equals, and soon-to-be architects of a new kind of peace. In the days following the binding ceremony, Valara shimmered with a fragile peace. Banners of intertwined earth green and Salyun gold fluttered from every spire, and the air hummed with cautious optimism. Yet beneath the surface, currents of unease swirled. Saren, though recovering, remained pale and distant, her golden eyes shadowed by something deeper than exhaustion. The key of Velara now pulsed steadily within the heart vault beneath the palace, but its resonance felt altered. Not broken, but changed, as if imprinted with a foreign frequency. Joran noticed it first during his nightly walks through the palace gardens. The singing flora no longer harmonized as they once did. Their melodies carried a dissonant undercurrent, like a warning whispered in a forgotten tongue. Lyra tried to reassure him. The key absorbed Saren's essence during the overload, she explained one evening as they stood beneath the twin moons. It will take time to stabilize. But even she couldn't ignore the strange tremors that rippled through the palace foundations at irregular intervals. Tremors that coincided with Saren's nightmares. Then came the message from the outer colonies. A distress beacon, encoded in pre-accord Salian cipher, crackled through the royal comms array. It originated from the moon of Xylos, a barren satellite once used as a Cthar penal outpost, long abandoned after the Great Purge. The transmission was fragmented, but one phrase repeated like a dirge. "She is not who she seems." Joran and Lyra brought the recording to Saren. She listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When it ended, she rose slowly from her chair. "Xylos holds the memory vaults," she said quietly. "Records of every royal trial, every binding, every betrayal. If someone tampered with them, they could rewrite our history." "Why would the Cthar care about archives?" Joran asked. "Because history is power," Saren replied. "And if they've planted false records claiming the accord was forged under deception, the entire alliance collapses." Against the council's protests, the three of them departed for Xylos aboard the Starling, Joran's refurbished scout vessel retrofitted with Salian cloaking tech. The journey was tense. Saren barely spoke, often staring into the void as if searching for something only she could see. Lyra, ever perceptive, began to notice subtle changes in her sister. Her bioluminal aura flickered at odd moments, and once Joran swore he saw her reflection in a viewport move a fraction of a second after she did. On Xylos, the ruins were eerily preserved beneath a dome of fractured energy. Inside the memory vaults, crystalline data spires lined the walls, each humming with stored consciousness. But the central archive, the core spire, was shattered. Not by force, but by precision. Someone had extracted specific memories and replaced them with synthetic imprints. As Lyra interfaced with a secondary spire to trace the breach, Joran stood guard near the entrance. That's when he saw it. A glint of Cthar alloy embedded in the dust. Too clean, too recent. He called out a warning, but it was too late. The vault doors sealed with a hiss. From the shadows emerged not Cthar soldiers, but figures clad in Salian royal guard armor. Yet their movements were wrong, too fluid, too synchronized. "Replicants?" Saren breathed, her voice tight. "Biosynthetic doubles. Only the inner circle has access to that tech." One of the replicants stepped forward, removing its helmet. Beneath it was Saren's face, but colder, sharper, eyes devoid of warmth. "You shouldn't have come," the duplicate said in Saren's voice, yet hollow, like an echo through stone. The real Saren staggered back, clutching her chest. They used the key's resonance during the overload. They didn't just attack us, they implanted a neural echo. A sleeper copy of me." Lyra gasped. "That's why your aura's unstable. You're fighting her inside your own mind." The replicant Saren raised a hand. "The true heir does not bow to humans. The accord is a weakness. And you, sister, have been compromised." She gestured, and the other replicants advanced. What followed was a desperate battle through the vaults. Joran used his knowledge of human guerrilla tactics, overloading data conduits, triggering archival purges to blind their enemies, while Lyra wove sonic barriers to disrupt the replicants' neural sync. But Saren fought differently. She didn't attack. She remembered. Standing before her duplicate, she closed her eyes and began reciting a childhood lullaby, the one their mother sang before the royal purge that orphaned them. The real one, not the archived version. The replicant faltered. For a split second, confusion flickered in its golden eyes. That was all Lyra needed. She unleashed a focused harmonic burst tuned to the original Saren's biofrequency. The replicants collapsed, their systems overloaded by conflicting identity signals. In the silence that followed, Saren sank to her knees, trembling. "They're inside the palace," she whispered. "Not just guards, ministers, advisors. They've been replacing key figures for months. The wedding, it wasn't just to stop the union. It was a distraction. Back on Velara, they found the truth worse than imagined. The council had been quietly purged. The High Oracle now spoke with a voice too smooth, too perfect. Even the palace flora responded to commands that weren't Lyra's. The replicants weren't just mimicking, they were governing. Worse still, the real High Oracle was found in the lower catacombs, her mind hollowed out, her body kept alive only as a biological transmitter. The Cthar hadn't invaded with ships. They'd infiltrated with ideas, with copies, with patience. But the greatest twist came when Joran accessed the palace's private comms log. Buried beneath layers of encryption was a message sent from Saren's personal channel, before the trial. It was addressed to the Cthar High Command. Proceed with Phase 2. The human is emotionally compromised. He will follow her anywhere. Joran's blood ran cold. He confronted Saren in the moon chamber, where she stood gazing at the twin orbs in the sky. "Did you betray us?" he asked, his voice raw. Saren turned, her eyes filled with sorrow, but no guilt. "I sent that message," she admitted, "but not to the Cthar." She activated a hidden projector. The message replayed, but this time with a decryption layer only royal blood could unlock. The recipient wasn't Cthar. It was the Velari Resistance, a secret network of Salian loyalists who'd gone underground after the first replicant incursions. "I knew the Cthar were planning something," she said, "but I couldn't act openly. They were watching me, so I used their own surveillance against them. I let them think I was collaborating. The message was bait. The Phase 2 they read was a trap." Joran stared at her, stunned. "You risked everything, Lyra's trust, my life, on a gamble?" "I risked it on you," she said softly, "because only a human, unpredictable, illogical, driven by love rather than protocol, would do exactly what you did. Charge into the labyrinth, defy death for my sister, and question the truth even when it hurt. The replicants couldn't simulate that. They understand strategy, not sacrifice." Lyra entered then, having overheard. Tears streamed down her face, but she stepped forward and embraced her sister. "You should have told me." "I couldn't," Saren whispered. "If I'd even thought of you in my plans, the replicants monitoring my neural patterns would have detected it. I had to believe you were truly lost to me, to make them believe it too." Now, with the truth revealed, the trio devised a counterstrike. Using the altered key of Velara, not as a weapon, but as a resonance amplifier, they planned to broadcast Saren's true biosignature across the entire planet. Every replicant, every synthetic, every implanted echo would be exposed the moment the signal hit. But there was a cost. The broadcast would require Saren to merge fully with the key, permanently. She would become part of Velara's consciousness, her physical form dissolving into the planet's living network. She would live on, but never again walk beside her sister, never again feel the wind on her face. The night before the activation, the three of them sat in the royal greenhouse, surrounded by the whispering orchids. Joran handed Saren a small earth trinket, a compass, its needle spinning uselessly in Velara's magnetic field. "So you'll always know which way is home," he said. Saren smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "Home isn't a place, Joran. It's the people who choose to stand with you when the stars go dark." At dawn, they ascended the sky spire once more. This time, no enemies awaited them. The replicants, sensing the shift in power, had already begun to malfunction, their artificial minds unraveling. Saren placed her hands on the key. Light bloomed from her fingertips, spreading through the spire, down into the roots of the city, across oceans and mountains, until every living thing on Velara resonated with her truth. As her form began to fade, she looked at Lyra and Joran, her golden eyes glowing like twin suns. "Protect each other," she said, "and never stop questioning what seems certain." Then she was gone. Not dead, but woven into the world itself. The palace sang again, its melody whole once more. In the weeks that followed, the real Salian loyalists emerged from hiding. The Cthar, exposed and leaderless, retreated beyond the galactic rim. The accord was not only preserved, it was strengthened, now forged in fire and truth. Joran and Lyra ruled not as queen and consort, but as co-sovereigns, their union a living bridge between species. And sometimes, on quiet nights beneath the twin moons, they would hear a familiar lullaby carried on the wind, a melody of sacrifice, love, and the unbreakable bond between sisters, and the human who dared to love one enough to challenge the stars. Years later, beneath the twin moons of a peaceful Velara, Joran and Lyra stood hand in hand on the palace balcony, watching their daughter, born of starlight and stardust, With her mother's ruby hair and her father's warm smile, chase glowing fireflies through the singing gardens. The key of Velara hummed gently in the heart of the city, its rhythm steady, its voice forever intertwined with Saren's quiet presence in every breeze and bloom. The galaxy still held dangers, but here, in this moment, love had won. Not through conquest, but through trust, sacrifice, and the quiet courage to choose each other, again and again. And they lived, not just happily but wholly, together.